How do you describe CEPR to your friends who know nothing about it? That's a tough one. You can't find a place like this hardly anywhere else in the world.
I describe CEPR as being nonpartisan, very pragmatic problem solver focused on economics. And they are using economic tools to solve a wide range of problems, way beyond just what you think of as classic economics, healthcare, studying work from home dynamics, studying the impact of COVID on marginalized populations. It goes way beyond what people think of as normal economics. It is vastly relevant to every aspect of people's lives.
I think people tend to think of the US as really just Republicans and Democrats. But if you look at decades worth of Gallup poll data, it's really more like 1/3 Republicans, 1/3 Democrats, and 1/3 independents. In politics, pendulum swings from one direction to the other, but really ends up being a race to the center. So by being nonpartisan, I think that's where interesting ideas can live and actually have a shot at making it into policy.
When the name CEPR first came out, people were like, what's that? Now I think if you say CEPR, people actually know what CEPR is a lot more than they did 20 years ago.
CEPR was founded about 40 years ago. And at that time, I was actually a student in middle school, living 3,000 miles away. So I wasn't very involved with CEPR at that time. But my understanding is that CEPR was created to help support great economic policy relevant research and help get that research more on the radar screen of people who are on the front lines of policy who might benefit from it.
Stanford, before CEPR, was known for economic theory primarily, but there were lots of people in economic theory and in econometrics that put Stanford on the map. It was not policy. And in a way, CEPR was trying to redress that imbalance.
It was founded to try to get some interaction between academic economists across the university, but also have these academic economists interact with policymakers and to try to apply some influence on policy, and economic policy in particular.
I think that's important, actually, to understand the beginning. And like a lot of successes, there become multiple versions of who did what. Let me give you my version, which I think is accurate. The most important person in founding CEPR was Michael Boskin. Michael Boskin more or less drew up the blueprint for CEPR, was the first director. Another player, even before Michael, was George Shultz. George had a party at his house. He invited all of his economics friends from Hoover, the business school, the engineering school, the economics department, the med school. He was amazed. Some of these people didn't even know each other. And he thought, boy, we need an institution at Stanford that brings together all the economists strewn all over the university. We attracted some amazing participants in Silicon Valley, not only back us financially, but to help get the organization rolling. Michael got the offer from George H.W. Bush to be chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, which actually was a huge achievement for CEPR, to have a CEPR director suddenly be one of the chief economists of the country. So I served in the position of director. And I would say CEPR was a good organization, had some influence, but it wasn't as great as it is now. The big turning point for CEPR, to go from what you might call CEPR 1.0 to CEPR 2.0, was the Economic Summit. It put CEPR on the map. I mean, people want to join our advisory board. This is something that's really going somewhere. There was nothing quite like this in the United States.
People think about economics, this is thinking about the broad public. They think macroeconomic forecasts, which are never right. But that's the power of having CEPR located in the heart of Stanford University, where they can work on healthcare problems. They can bring in the law school, they can bring in the business school, they can bring in the people in the engineering schools to tackle these problems that are really complicated, that aren't isolated in one silo, one academic silo. That's not the way the world works.
We were sharing space with the economics department, which was quite inadequate. We really couldn't bring in visitors, which I think is another source of strength. That would probably be the second landmark growth thing. The first one being the summit, the second one being this building. George Shultz saw the need to this building, and his determination to build this building is the only reason it came about. John Hennessy talked to John Gunn and said, you know, I've got 4 or 5 initiatives I have for the university. Which of these initiatives, none of them were CEPR, appeal to you the most, John? And John says, I want to build a building for CEPR. And so we got a building for CEPR. John and Cynthia Gunn gave about 2/3 of the money for this building. The university gave none. We got the other third from our set of faithful donors that have been with us for a long time. I don't think there's ever been a building like this at Stanford. John and Cynthia not only gave the gift that made it possible, but they were involved in every element of this building.
I want to live happily and invest wisely in a world that I do not adequately understand. Cynthia and myself try to give money to organizations that are operating on all 8 cylinders and that are really functioning well. It's a very talented place.
The building obviously gave us more space to have more people around, but it also made other people across the university come to CEPR more, see CEPR as a center of action. When we moved to this beautiful new building, it was not only moving to a new building, but we had a lot of space to expand our programming. And one of the things that we wanted to do was train more young scholars. In the mid-2000s, we got a grant to start a postdoc program that was something that was very different in the market that hadn't been there before in all of economics. In a lot of the sciences, everybody does a postdoc, but in economics, people didn't do postdocs. We turned it on its head and said, this is kind of like starting your career with a sabbatical, so that you got a chance to do research and really get your career moving. We wanted CEPR to be a place where there was a lot of energy with new ideas and young people coming in, and it's a great way of providing energy in the building of young people.
Our commitment to young scholars partly was, you know, just like you're committed to your kids, the next generation, let's get them interested in economic policy. We always were kind of a young person's organization. One nice thing about that is it's affecting the economics profession, not only at Stanford, but all over the country.
When I took over as director of CEPR, I wanted to learn from John, so I basically kind of shadowed him for a year. He remained director during my first year at Stanford, and I observed him, and he's just an incredible leader, visionary person. And as great as CEPR was, I thought there were a number of areas where we could get better. So more opportunities for students. I thought we could expand our faculty ranks. So we brought in a lot of additional faculty who had strong interest in economic policy. That has really been helpful because I think that has broadened our arsenal of expertise, and that has really led to a lot of great research connections and collaborations.
And that's what defines the leverage.
With Mark, CEPR has really grown the number of senior fellows, postdoc fellows, graduate fellows, and pre-doc, you know, just all those programs. The advisory board itself, that's probably one of my favorite things about CEPR is there isn't a corporation in America that attracts the caliber and variety of business and political and thought leaders that the CEPR advisory board has.
I would say one of the real calling cards of CEPR is just the people. You've got the Nobel Prize winners, you've got these icons like John Taylor and George Shultz, may he rest in peace, and Michael Boskin, these just incredible people, and the senior fellows and the postdocs. I mean, just up and down the organization. It's just such a treat to find people who are so brilliant and so motivated to bring economics to bear for our collective benefit.
It is a vibrant center of economic thought that focuses on spreading that thought to undergrads, to people in the beginning of their academic careers in economics. And so that's key. Education is sort of an interesting task. It has a very long gestation period. You have something that's very active in spreading knowledge and investigating and getting younger people involved. And then you don't know when it's all going to work. But it will.
It's a fundamentally optimistic organization, and there is a bias towards action where they want to make things better. The idea that maybe you can't make things perfect, and in fact, sometimes you can't even make them good, but you can make them better, that's something that CEPR seems to believe.
Research isn't the only thing that influences economic policy. It's a complicated hornet's nest of factors that drive economic policy. But I do think that research plays a role and that it could play an even bigger role. And I think it's a huge honor to be heading up this organization, because I think the knowledge that we're producing ultimately has led to better policies that benefit the country, that benefit the world.
This is a very special place. And anybody that's fortunate enough to come to Stanford and study here at CEPR is one of the luckiest people in the world. The richness and the uniqueness that a place like CEPR constitutes. I don't think there are very many other places in the world like CEPR, period, over and out.